Now, if Iran were smart, and it's not clear that they are, they would not respond, and they would then try to negotiate in order to save their regime. But if they do something like mine the Strait of Hormuz, or try to take a shot at any of those U.S. Navy vessels, or manage to fire any missiles at U.S. bases, or kill any American personnel, then this will escalate a lot further. And there's no doubt tonight, in my mind, Sean, that President Xi in Beijing and President Putin in Moscow are taking note of the U.S. military capability.
There are reports in Israel that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu may be planning to address his nation and address the world after President Trump speaks, given the U.S. military action that has just commenced again.
While the Israelis have targeted with precision strikes both nuclear facilities, military officials from the IRGC, and top Iranian nuclear scientists. But again, the latest information that we have tonight, President Trump ordering these strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities, and the Israelis are now bracing for the possibility of an Iranian response. Israel's Home Front Command has just released a statement restricting activities for civilians tomorrow. Workplaces will be closed, people will not be in schools, and there's a directive to the civilian population of Israel to stay close to bomb shelters, understanding that the Iranians still have ballistic missile capabilities and they can use them to target major population centers here in Israel. Sean?
That's an important admonition. There's no such thing as a military effort, Trey, that does not have risk associated with it. We talked about this all week in the lead up to this day, in the possibility that this may happen. And obviously the president is certainly, I'm sure, very well aware. There's been a lot of evacuations around the region on top of fortification. All of the military might of the U.S. Navy and other armed services are in the area in case such a retaliation were to take place, and clearly they are prepared for such. But after today, you have to wonder if the Iranian Supreme Leader got the message or not. Time will tell. Trey Yangst on the ground in Israel. Stay with us. We'll get back to you throughout this hour. Here with more details from tonight's very critical strike, along with what we can expect moving forward. Jennifer Griffin, she is in the Pentagon tonight. Jennifer, what's amazing about this, I did have an opportunity just minutes before coming on the air to speak to the president. We had initially discussed, both of us this week, that it would probably take at the Fordo facility as many as 2 bunker buster bombs. I can confirm it was 6 bunker buster bombs that were used in that one, on that one fortified, deeply buried inside that mountain site, the one that everybody worried about, the one that Israel was not going to be capable of taking out unless they went nuclear.
Well, that's right, Sean, and it's very interesting that the president shared with you that 6 of those MOP, massive ordnance penetrator, the 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs, were used on Fordo. That would mean that you would have had at least 3 B-2 bombers dropping those, because each of the B-2s can carry 2 of those MOP bombs. Based on my assessment and what I know about Fordo, there are 2 entrances to Fordo, so you may have had 2 bunker busters in each of the entrances. The way they work, as we've discussed in the past, Sean, is that one of the MOP bombs drops in and can penetrate about 200 feet underground. It makes about a 25-foot radius hole into the ground, and then the second bomb, dropped from the B-2 bomber, will penetrate that exact spot and go even further. And Fordo, as we know, is about 300 feet underground. I suspect that the third spot that was hit at Fordo, based on the structure of that facility, that underground nuclear facility in the mountain there, is a ventilation shaft that is very prominent. And if you drop 2 bunker buster bombs of those MOP 30,000-pound bombs through the ventilation shaft, that would be another way to reach deep underground and to ensure that you destroyed that facility 300 feet underground. I think it's also notable, Sean, that the president told you that TLAMs, or Tomahawk missiles, were used in the strike on Natanz. Natanz also has an underground facility. Those Tomahawks would have been fired, as you mentioned, from submarines that were attached to either the USS Carl Vinson aircraft carrier strike group or the USS Nimitz, which was newly in the region. It had steamed all the way from the Pacific, and we understand that it arrived in the CENTCOM AOR earlier today. So those Tomahawks could be fired from any number of locations from those aircraft carriers. And then you have Isfahan. Isfahan is an above-ground site, and so you could have used conventional weapons for that. There could have been the Air Force could have been involved in that, or it could have been simply those Tomahawks. Natanz has 3 underground facilities, so there would have been about 6 points of impact at Natanz. And so we'll just have to wait and see if the B-2s were involved at all in Natanz or Esfahan, but certainly the involvement of Tomahawks, U.S. naval submarines, and those incredible B-2 bombers. What's notable to me, Sean, is that this morning we woke up looking westwards because, and this was all part of the deception in terms of the operational security for this incredible mission, is that those 6 B-2 bombers that were seen by radar trackers, open source flight trackers, they were heading west towards Guam, we were told. U.S. officials confirmed to us that they were heading to Guam. It's about a 30-hour flight. If they took off from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri and flew directly to Iran, it would be about 30 hours. They would not have made it in time. So it was not those B-2s that were involved in this mission. Most likely what happened is the B-2s also took off to the east. So another squadron took off from Whiteman to the east, and that's about a 15-hour trip to Iran, and they would be on their way back to the United States right now. It's a 30-hour round trip if you fly to the east, and that's where we saw that air refueling bridge that was built earlier in the week, where all those air refuelers, about 30, were sent from the United States to Europe and to the Middle East to help
Jennifer,
with those B-2s. Sean?
Let me give you a little bit more detail. I'm being told now from a reliable source that Fordo, they believe it is gone. They believe that has been wiped out. And again, we had discussed earlier in the week the possibility of not 1 but 2 bunker buster bombs. Again, 30,000-pound bombs being necessary to take out that one deeply buried facility. I can put clarification on Natanz and Esfahan, the other 2 facilities that you were referencing and discussing. The 30 Tomahawks from a submarine over 400 miles away took out the remainder of the sites. It was believed, the assessment was that the Israelis had taken out about 75% of those sites. So it was basically completing the mission that had begun with Israel on those other 2 locations, just to give you clarification.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, but truly, the fact that 30 Tomahawks were fired from the U.S. naval vessels, from those submarines. Again, this just shows the strength and the ability and the precision of the U.S. military. And there's no doubt tonight, in my mind, Sean, that President Xi in Beijing and President Putin in Moscow are taking note of the U.S. military capabilities and what Israel has been able, tiny Israel has been able to accomplish in the last 10 days. So this is really a very, very significant night in terms of what the mission accomplished. But as we have discussed, what comes next? And the U.S. military is warning its personnel across the Middle East. There are 40,000 troops across the Middle East at bases in Syria, Iraq, as well as in the Gulf states. And they are now on high alert, expecting some sort of response from Iran. Now, if Iran were smart, and it's not clear that they are, they would not respond. And they would then try to negotiate in order to save their regime. But if they do something like mine the Strait of Hormuz or try to take a shot at any of those U.S. Navy vessels or manage to fire any missiles at U.S. bases or kill any American personnel, then this will escalate a lot further. This has the potential to end right now if the Iranians do not respond. Sean?
A couple of things that you're saying, Jennifer, and you get to follow the greatest, best military that God ever gave man, and the bravest of the brave. And you're right, and every single military effort brings with it danger, and you have to game out and calculate out what the potential response might be. Obviously, they are prepared for that. In the lead up to this, we know a lot of people had been evacuated. A lot of people had been warned. The president himself was warning the people in Tehran to get out of Tehran and give them an opportunity. As he said, he doesn't have a problem with the people of Iran, but they were never going to have nuclear weapons. We went back and looked. The first time he said that was in 2011. And he had been very, very consistent in his statement about that. And, you know, other early indications, too, is that he gave them, there was a little note at the end of his statement tonight that he's willing to discuss peace again. And then that creates now a dilemma, once again, for the supreme leader of Iran. Will he remain stubborn to the point where their refineries will be targeted next, where their gas grid will be targeted next, and they'll have no power? If they take out the refineries, they'll have no economy in Iran. So big decisions on their part tonight, things they should be thinking about if they're thinking about any retaliation. Jennifer Griffin, we'll get back to you. We appreciate your report, and God bless our military. Incredible feat that they were able to accomplish tonight. We bring in now Lucas Tomlinson. He is live outside the White House tonight. Lucas, I'm sure probably a lot of activity in there.
There's no question, Sean. We're about 45 minutes away from President Trump addressing the nation from the White House after those unprecedented strikes against Iran's nuclear enrichment sites, 3 in all in Isfahan, Fordo, and Natanz.
Point that the B-2 bombers were employed in this strike. We don't know the exact ordnance or how many different bombs were dropped, and I'll focus in on Fordo specifically because that is the facility that is some 300 feet underground, and that is the weapon, the American weapon, the only nation on Earth that has the capability, the capacity to take that out with their bombs. Based on the one image, the visuals of the fire that we're getting right now, it certainly seems like there's a massive scene somewhere in the world if this video was just taken recently. So when the daylight comes up, some of the questions that we'll have and slowly get the answers for is, was this a multiple strike package involving several of those bunker busters? Was it just one bunker buster that was able to take this facility out, as the president has since reposted that Fordo is completely gone? So you would imagine that they probably struck this site multiple times to make sure the job is done. Now, the last note here is many of you around the world have been commenting about the possibility of some of this nuclear material leaking out, getting into the atmosphere. We've talked with some experts here. It's a very low likelihood, very low probability that anything in that facility, given the state of the uranium that they're trying to refine and enrich, would cause any sort of nuclear catastrophe like we've seen with Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island. That's very far off possibility. Experts are telling us they don't believe that there's going to be any immediate threat for any of the leakage from what is at this site. And in fact, we know that Natanz and Isfahan has been hit by the Israelis already, and the IAEA director, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the director there has said that their monitoring stations has not detected any anomalies with nuclear radiation or any hazardous materials coming out after previous Israeli strikes at those other nuclear installations, which again, the president saying tonight that it was not just Fordo, it was also the 2 other sites, Natanz and Isfahan, that were also hit by U.S. jets. A considerable moment here as we're watching history take place. We believe this is the first time, barring covert action, of course, that the United States has directly bombed Iranian soil since the Islamic regime has come into power in the late 1970s. Of course, they have been hitting Iranian-backed interests. You'll remember Qasem Soleimani was killed in Baghdad, Iraq, but this is a major moment here with U.S. jets flying over Iranian airspace.
Absolutely. A couple of quick things, Zach. Any reaction from Prime Minister Netanyahu yet? I'm searching social media as you're reporting. Are you hearing anything from his office, from the IDF, in terms of immediate reaction?
I will tell you that one of my IDF sources, the reason why I got out of bed here at 2 a.m. was one of my IDF sources texted me a picture of an American flag and a screaming eagle, and that's when I knew, okay, we might have something cooking here. I don't see anything official from the Prime Minister's office yet. Again, it's 3:45 in the morning here. We were starting to get a sense, based on Israeli movement with the airstrikes, that something might have been brewing over the last 2 days, and that was because the Israeli Air Force had pulled back from striking the nuclear installations as heavy as they were at the start of the week, and were focusing just on the ballistic missile launchers. They were telling us that they think they had knocked out a couple of those sites out of commission already, but it appears that with the U.S. now finishing the job, perhaps striking those sites again, that there was more material or more facility that was left to be destroyed.
Absolutely. I-24 News is reporting at this hour that the President of the United States and the Israeli Prime Minister spoke by phone. We have not yet confirmed that at Newsmax, so we'll keep digging. Obviously, Zach is just jumping in here with me live. Zach, what about what may come next in terms of both what the Israelis could be preparing for in terms of a potential retaliatory strike or strikes from Iran? We don't know what their capacity is. Their military has been depleted before our eyes over the last week and a couple of days. And what the U.S. government has been doing, obviously the president for well over a week now has been trying to protect U.S. military troops, U.S. military assets, the U.S. embassy there in Israel. What's your sense about the preparations for what may come next?
Well, it certainly seems like everything had been put into place in the proper way for this strike to take place. We know that the non-essential staff had been moved out more than a week ago out of American installations, not just at the diplomatic posts, but at U.S. military installations as well. We know that they're out of harm's way, non-essential staff and dependents. This here in Israel is taking place with the last ballistic missile attack here being more than 24 hours old. It was a very nice day today. People were out on the streets again. The beach was somewhat full as we were not under any immediate threat. We should note, as some of our reporting has mentioned over the week, that what we're experiencing here in Israel is Iran's long-range missile fleet. This is their capability to reach more than 1,000 miles across the Middle East and hit us. But for American men and women in the armed forces that are in Iraq or Bahrain or any installation that's within 500 miles or so of Iranian soil, that's within range of these medium, or the medium-range missile arsenal that Iran has that they have not deployed yet at this point in the conflict. It's likely that the Israelis have not been hitting those arsenals because they don't pose a direct threat to Israel right now. Right now, the long-range ballistic missiles do. So that right now would be the main concern, is that I would say, and what we had been talking about over the week had been American installations in Iraq. That's what came under fire when the president in his first term killed Qasem Soleimani with that strike in Baghdad in Iraq. The American installations suffered a pretty severe night of shelling from those medium-range missiles that Iran has. I would also say one of the other concerns that we've heard is that shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, the Iranian regime has made very specific pointed threats about targeting commercial vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. There is a lot of ships out there tonight. You would imagine that if they really are backed into a corner and they can't strike Israel at force, they might start to pester these commercial vessels in the Strait of Hormuz as well. Yeah. And I would also imagine that the Houthis tonight, who have been relatively quiet throughout all of this, will start to get in the mix.
The region braces for the possibility of any sort of response from the regime. Brett?
All right, Trey, thank you. Obviously, the president making that decision in the face of some very loud voices in his own party and even the MAGA wing of his own party, saying that this will start World War III, saying it was the wrong decision, yet he made the decision. And the Wall Street Journal, which has been critical of him in various ways over different things, is very supportive of this, writing, he gave Khamenei, the supreme leader, 60 days, but this president would not get rolled by the regime's endless delay and lie routine, what President Trump calls tapping us along. Other nations will take note with enormous benefit to the repair of our shattered ability to deter anyone after the Biden years. But the immediate enormous benefit is denying a rogue regime an easy path to nuclear weapons. Bravo. Again, that's the Wall Street Journal. We'll bring in Lucas Tomlinson at the White House. We're now a little more than an hour away from President Trump addressing the nation on this decision, a momentous, historic decision in the country.
The first one would go in. The second would go in to continue the pancake effect and the outer implosion that is caused by those weapons, and then they would leave. They did the same things, obviously, to the other two facilities. I don't think the president, and I'm not speaking for him, but if you look at what he's been saying, he hasn't been saying anything about destroying the entire Iranian nation. What he has been saying is that we can't live with a nuclear-armed Iran, and he has moved that off the table. There's no talk of ground troops, obviously, but the firepower that exists in that region on behalf of the United States would devastate anything and any time the Iranians would launch any further attacks on American personnel. The response would be, it would be a devastating blow at what's left of the Iranian command and control.
So to put a finer point as well on the president's initial words, his first post on Truth Social, quote, a full payload of bombs dropped on the primary site. Define that for us.
So you had the ground penetrator. You probably had weapons that took out what they might have had in terms of air defense around those. On those sites, you're not going to need much more than the 30,000-pound ground penetrator units. You drop one, it goes in, it starts the implosion, and the second one finishes it off. I don't think they made many more than that. They could follow that up with a payload from the B-52s just to level any supporting buildings or assets that may have been around that facility. They probably used weapons to collapse tunnels that may have been leading in and out of those mountains in that area, making it almost impossible for them to dig out of it. So you could have seen that in terms of more than just the B-2s, but I don't know. If I'm doing my old Air Force job of planning, I probably would have done just more than the B-2s.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and we understand it's still early stages. We're trying to paint the picture a little bit, and you're doing a fabulous job of that, as always. What about next steps? You just mentioned a moment ago that it's very clear there will not be American boots on the ground. I think this president has made that clear, but there have been critics like Tucker Carlson and others in his own party suggesting that he could get into a quagmire, basically. But what I'm seeing immediately is a limited U.S. military strike, as we anticipated, and B, the president immediately is saying, now is the time for peace. In a second post on Truth Social, quote, Iran must now agree to end this war. This is not a president who's talking about expanding conflict. I'm hearing an immediate end to hostilities. What does all that mean to you?
And he's just given them proof. And look, this is a master stroke. In terms of the way it was carried out and the different levels of military deception and diplomacy that this White House has used. The Iranians are now being told it's time to throw the towel in. You've just experienced a devastating attack on your most protected, secure, vital infrastructure. There are over 30 vessels and submarines sitting in the Indian Ocean, in addition to the strategic fist of the United States Air Force in the Indian Ocean on Diego Garcia. If you do not do these things, and if you harm Americans, the next response will be more far-reaching and probably more devastating. But in the meantime, the Israelis, I believe, will continue. I think you and I talked, Ed. I always thought that regime change on the part of the Israelis was a secondary consideration, a secondary goal. I think now that has now become a goal that they think is achievable. Problem is, we don't know what happens next. I know the Israelis have been reaching out to the Iranian army. Remember, there are two groups in Iran. There's the conventional forces of conscripts, the average Iranian who's told you have to go into the army. And then there's the Ayatollah's thugs, the Revolutionary Guards, the Quds forces, the terrorist gangsters that they put into the street whenever there's a protest, the Bashtis. We don't know what they're doing there. I'm sure, though, that they have probably reached out to one or two colonels in the Revolutionary Guard Corps and said, now is the time for you to throw off your former affiliation and end this. But we'll see. Iran, the Persian civilization is incredibly prideful. They view themselves as an ancient civilization. I don't know what the rally around the flag effect will be, because I think even the liberals at the BBC conceded that their polls showed that over 80% of the Iranian people wanted to get rid of the Ayatollahs today. So we'll see what happens.